to Litera TV. I'm Caroline Hill, Editor-in-Chief of Legal IT Insider, and I'm here with Neil Araujo, who, as you all know, is the CEO of iManage. Hi, Neil.
Hi, Caroline, and thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me. We're here to talk about Connect Live. We're here to talk about a few things, actually, but we're here to talk about Connect Live and AKA then looking back at the past year, some of the key things that have happened. And it's certainly not been a boring year. I think that's fair to say.
No, it's certainly not. And, I feel just glad that I'm here.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about some of the highlights of the conference and the last year, and also particularly, so Clifford Chance. So Paul Greenwood, CIO of Clifford Chance, joined you during the conference, which I personally found really interesting. So I'm going to ask you a bit about that. But in your keynote, I think one of the interesting things, probably given the year that we've had, is that iManage has grown. I think one of the first things that struck me is that iManage has grown by upwards of 100 people. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah. Leaving out the acquisition, 100 people. With the acquisition, more than that. The acquisition of closing folders. So we grew. We didn't stop growing, and our view on that is on the one hand, you've got the pandemic, which is causing issues temporarily, but if anything, it's only going to accelerate the move to digital and the space that we play in. So we doubled down.
Yeah, well, I think you're obviously right. I mean, I'll come on to the pandemic in a bit, but so. In terms of the brand, so I think one of the things, the big shifts, again, you highlight this in the keynote. So you talk about the shift to making knowledge work. And what I liked is that you challenged yourself on, you said, what value, you're focusing on brand, what value does that have for customers? I think it's always good to ask that question. But so tell us a bit about why it's valuable and also the research that underpins it.
Sure. The genesis of that whole effort was to ensure that what we do is relevant in the context of change, and change in the industry, how the industry is changing, as well as change internally at iManage, that how we've evolved and changed. And we picked at the end of all of that research 3 little words that maybe they're not that little, that sort of articulate our purpose. But the big shift for us mentally was this focus on outcomes. What is the outcome? Why is it that customers are investing or want to invest in technologies like ours, and how do we make sure we don't lose sight of that outcome? Because very often we focus on the intermediate milestone. I got done with the implementation, but that's not why they bought your product. They bought your product to achieve a certain goal. And how do we capture that goal? And how do we provide the vocabulary to articulate what that is, so that we know when that goal is achieved. So that was sort of the bigger intent of what we were trying to do.
Yeah, it was a huge research project, wasn't it? I have got the stats somewhere. Yeah. I'm sure you know them off the top of your head, but I think it was. I mean, we all know about White Rabbit, but this was I think the biggest research project that you've done. Is that right? Yeah.
It was several months. It went almost all of the year. Probably about 8 months of research, which included something called the listening post, where we scanned literally thousands of blogs, not just iManage blogs, but thousands of industry blogs across industries, to understand what is it that was the conversation that was happening in our space. And then, from there, going to surveys that were done of customers, non-customers, employees, to understand preferences, understand what they were trying to achieve. And then once we sort of took all of that and got to a hypothesis, then testing that in live interviews, with customers as well as non-customers, and then ultimately we got to three little words.
It's interesting about the so knowledge. KM is, I suppose, you're not talking about KM, but knowledge in the wider sense has changed, hasn't it, within the industry? I think it now encompasses so much more, and the role of knowledge workers and knowledge managers is so much bigger. Do you think it almost deserves its own category, as it were, like CRM?
Yeah, that's our belief, and I hope, I'd say, that it stands alone in as and gets the attention that other categories have been able to do. And what it does is it basically takes the productivity of the end user, and to a different level as a result of what computing can do. And that's a goal that we're looking for. And we'll see. It takes a while. I think this year you're going to see more from us in terms of advancing this message to the next level, and it's equally exciting. Stuff that our team is working on.
I mean, it's been a while so I think certainly since I've been writing about you haven't been referring to iManage as just a pure repository. It's been much wider than that. It's been about collaboration, increasingly so. I thought that one of the really interesting stats that you came up with was about that large companies, I don't actually know where this stat comes from, but just to refer it out there. I mean, I'll share a link for Connect Live, the content, for if you want to watch it. If you're listening in and you want to watch it, I'll share a link so you can watch Neil doing it in the original. But so 47 million, large companies lose 47 million a year by failing to share knowledge. I mean, it's just it's a ridiculous stat, really. And I see, obviously the journey you're moving on to move even further away from being the kind of the just pure repository, but that's been a long journey. So we're looking forward to seeing where that goes. But I think the cloud, moving on to the cloud story, and I'm going to come on after this to talk about Azure specifically, but just in terms of the stats, I was quite surprised at how many customers are already in the cloud. I think you said 1,600, is that right?
Yeah, 1,600.
Around 1,600.
Yes.
And then last year it was 354 new customers. I don't know if people would be surprised. I think that's quite surprisingly high to me. Is that to you or not really? I suppose given the year that we had.
It is. It is, because that number would be significantly lower, 4 or 5 years back in the new customer acquisition rate. And given that our partners and our direct sales team couldn't travel most of last year, the fact that we were able to have, from a revenue perspective, a successful year was it was just amazing to me. I have still not digested it completely, but I'd rather have surprises on that front than anything else.
And then because obviously the size as well was, you had Baker McKenzie, Clifford Chance, which has got 6,500 people, and obviously it's a global. And I'm going to come on to ask you about Clifford Chance, as I mentioned. And then so by the end of 2021, you say you'll have over 50% of your customers will be in the cloud.
Yep.
And then 2022, you say 70%. Is that right? Is that your expectation?
Yeah, that's if we sort of take the trajectory and we project it out, that's what we see. And I think the pandemic has certainly accelerated. It's made cloud more acceptable, and the benefits. And I think what we saw with SolarWinds, earlier in the year has also got people thinking about, what about the benefits, the type of threats that are protected, are better protected through a cloud route.
Yeah.
What firms have also recognized, and you'll see this if you dig deeper in both the Clifford Chance as well as the Baker McKenzie implementations, is you take care of certain threat vectors better in the cloud, but there are others that emerge. And because your data is now outside of your firewall, and so you have to sort of look at security differently, and that's where our focus on security and governance comes in, because we've sort of solved both problems together, and you can't look at them in isolation.
No. It's interesting. So with Clifford Chance, I enjoyed your chat with Paul Greenwood. I think just harking back as to cloud becoming more acceptable, you asked him about how he got clients comfortable. And actually, what seems to be interesting about the pandemic is that it really seems to have changed the dialogue. When I started writing about tech years ago, these clients obviously were a huge issue in terms of law firms being very nervous. But Paul said that it didn't really seem like that difficult a journey. I mean, obviously, he said that they wrote to clients and then they revisited clients who perhaps once they'd got a bit further down the selection process. But is that reflective of people that you're speaking to, that the kind of the process to get sign off on cloud effectively has become not really that big a deal?
Well, we are not directly involved in those processes, so I don't know whether I can comment on that. I can tell you that both the fundamental work that we've done to ensure better security and our articulation of it, whether it is through certifications or our ability to sort of better define, what the threats are and how we protect against them. That's certainly at a point where we can get customers much more comfortable. The other thing that has certainly helped us improve our own operations is the type of clients we have. So when Clifford Chance is a very sophisticated security operation, and working with them, we know we've improved our our game, and the same with some of our corporate clients. These are some of the most there's clients that spend more on security than we spend on all of our R&D, and these are folks that are helping us get better, right? So we feel better about about what we've done and how we're articulating the story.
Yeah, actually, that's interesting, because Paul mentioned, he said very few clients have concerns over the cloud per se, but they have security requirements which need to be met. So the dialogue has become more sophisticated. So they say, so it's much more around does it tick the right boxes, and so the conversation has evolved.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. He also talked about, so just going back to this. So there were a few things. So performance was a key criteria. Clifford Chance obviously did a lot of work around measuring the performance, which I thought was quite interesting. But then I thought what was also interesting was there were two other things. Their approach to change management. I found it interesting that they were talking about the training, and obviously the pandemic shifted the way that training would be conducted, because normally they'd be advised to do the training in person. But he said, didn't he, that actually doing it, people taking care of their own training, doing it on YouTube or something, like being delivered in that way, was actually equally as successful.
Yeah. I think the biggest, there was one thing that I was the happiest with last year, and this was, we saw this in multiple huge conversions the migrations that we did in the U.S. Clifford Chance, and then Baker McKinsey talked about it too, it was we were just incapable of doing 10,000 users on a weekend before, and it wasn't the tech side of it; it was the change management side of it that was a limitation. I believe the reason we've been able to get there, the bottleneck when you migrating 10,000 users is end user acceptance. If your phones go off the hook, you can't hire enough people to make sure that you're not disrupting work and client service. And that's what we were able to prove out. And I believe the reason for that is people figured their way through the application, and it's because of the work that we put into user experience, which is something we've been talking about for the last 3-4 years, and that really sort of showed up big time, in these. So it's the training, but it's the fact that to get through the application and get the basic work done, the application, it was intuitive enough for people to get through their day.
Yeah. Okay. And then just lastly, I suppose, on Paul. So I suppose, actually, maybe this isn't a separate point. So I was just interested to note that they said that the pandemic, although it did push it out a little bit, time frame, actually, they came in under budget. And there was, that I thought that was quite interesting. Obviously, that was something that you were pleased to hear, Neil.
Yeah. Well, look, the team on both sides, the Clifford Chance project team and the iManage team that worked in the project were AA plus, and they did just a phenomenal job of the big picture, the detail, and just making sure that it went right. So iManage ends up looking good, but there were lots of people behind the scenes that probably deserve more credit in a project that goes well like this. I've had with the same sort of product, not so good outcomes either also. So, I don't want to take all the credit.
It was all down to you now. You can just take the credit while we're here, just the two of us. I want to talk to you about I've got quite a few questions, but I'm conscious of time. We'll see what we get through. But so the shift for me, one of the biggest announcements that you made in the past year was the shift to Azure, and what that means. And speaking to your clients, that's a big deal for clients and prospective cloud clients. And obviously you've developed your partnership with Microsoft, so you've achieved a co-sell a status, etc. But tell us first, tell us about the announcement. Tell us what it means. Tell us what you've done, and for anyone who's not familiar, I imagine most people are, but tell us what the development is in terms of what it means for the platform.
Sure. So we have embraced Azure as the infrastructure layer for the iManage cloud, and what that means is we can deliver new geographies, where the data is resident in those geographies much more faster, because we're not deploying our own hardware in a colo. What it also means is that we are also leveraging some of the HA and DR capabilities that Azure provides us, so it should increase our uptime, within region. And we're also leveraging some very interesting security capabilities, within Azure. So, for example, the Azure keyboard for managing your own keys. We're leveraging something called Azure Conditional Access, which allows you to control which IP addresses can access your data. So if you want anyone only within your network, to access the data, you've got controls over that. And we're doing some very interesting work, which I think is going to be groundbreaking. It's not out yet. It'll be out this year with the Microsoft Information Protection, which allows information to be protected even when it's outside of the DMS. So if we email it, if I email you, the partner comp information, because Caroline is trying to do a scoop. You won't be able to open it. That's the Azure is like sort of one word, but there's a lot packed behind it, which I think will bring value to mutual customers. And being two of the largest vendors in this in this space, us working together can only help.
Does it mean, in terms of your dollars going further, does it mean that because obviously you've obviously been working on private cloud basis and having much more of your own infrastructure. I imagine now, does this mean you'll be able to invest more in pushing the envelope in terms of R&D stuff?
That's a really good point, Caroline, and the answer is yes. In the mid to long term, not necessarily right in the short term, but the answer is yes. We can focus our efforts on where we add the most value, and that's certainly one of the benefits. I'll give you an example. Closing folders is also purely cloud based, and 95% of closing folders engineering is on the application, not on the infrastructure. And their NPS, which is the customer sat rating, is like 70, which is unheard of in the software industry. It's extremely high, and the way closing folders has grown is one associate talking to another associate and saying, you can't live without this, and that's what we want to get to, right? That level of satisfaction, and moving resources to where we can make that happen rather than the infrastructure layer, is So it's not necessarily just a money thing for us. It's a customer sat.
Yeah, absolutely. And just lastly, I suppose, before I ask you, well, I do want to ask you about the co-sell. But so what does it mean for customers in the immediate term, in terms of if you've got lots of customers in the private cloud, what does it mean for them in the short term? Does it mean anything to them?
Oh, well, nothing in the short run. There is an upgrade path, to the I manage cloud on Azure, and the user experience, remains exactly the same. It's just the performance and security, gets up leveled. So there is, there's nothing that there's no change from an end user perspective per se.
It'd be so much better when, with True Cloud, obviously everyone benefits from all of that. I mean, this is something everyone knows now. It's just everyone will get the same as you. I think you said in your keynote, everyone will be on the latest version with all the updates. It's starting to feel a bit of a no-brainer, isn't it?
Yeah. It's not just on the latest version, right? But the way our I manage cloud on Azure operates, you don't even you don't need downtime.
Yeah.
Which means that the security patch, I can do it right now. I don't have to wait for somebody's permission, because I can get it out there.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, all the SolarWinds and everything and everything, what happened to DLA, obviously it's been in people's minds for a really long time. And just briefly with co-sell status, so with Microsoft, so I think you've obviously worked with Microsoft, but this is something quite different, isn't it? What does it mean that you've achieved co-sell status?
Well, I think we've always had a relationship with Microsoft, but what's different this time is because of the use of Azure, we're also a very big customer, of Microsoft, and I think it gives us some amount of leverage. But I believe Microsoft is viewing partners differently now than before. And looking at us as partners, true partners in helping sort of the industry make progress. And having sort of that common vision is very powerful because it builds trust, and when there's trust, you can make progress. That's
yeah. I've seen a massive change in their attitude. It's great. It's great to see, actually. Just lastly, I suppose. So what's on the roadmap?
Well, we spoke about this in a fair amount of detail at Connect Live. So through the course of 2021, I think we've probably got 2 or 3 buckets in which we are investing. One is just deepening the relationship with Microsoft and integration, with Teams, with Office 365, the governance around Teams. The second area that that we are very focused on is bringing AI much more into as a feature within the context of the DMS. So that we can apply AI technologies at DMS scale, and we can apply it to use cases that are really important, really commonplace, but very mundane. So as a result of that, I suspect that the value that the end user will get from their DMS interaction is going to go much higher. So it's going to be more than just a place where where a document goes to die. When the final check-in happens, it actually has a much better life after that. So that's the second big sort of area in our roadmap, particularly for cloud customers. The third area that I'm very excited about is what we're doing with our workflow, the new business intake and conflicts, and the move to the cloud with those applications. And then finally, there's the research project that we've had going for a couple of years. It's called iManage Tracker. It's not a very attractive name, but it solves a really important problem, and that is automating the checklist. Which is probably the most fundamental workflow for a lawyer, and we are digitizing that process. And I think our team has done some. I think it's groundbreaking. It doesn't look groundbreaking because it's very, very simple. But that's to get this thing right, you have to get it really, really simple. But I think we've sort of cracked the sweet spot between Microsoft Task and Microsoft Project, so that something in the middle that is secure, that is integrated into your DMS, and that allows you to manage your work, more effectively. So as usual, a lot that's going on.
And actually, as we know, for lawyers, it doesn't always have to be the most attractive sounding, but actually, if it solves a real pain point, that's when they get excited, and that is a real pain point.
Yeah. And Callan, I have to say this, right? But all of that, the purpose of all of that is to make knowledge work.
Yes. Do you know what? Now it's amazing that as we finish, you managed to bring that back. And that seems like a really great place to end it, doesn't it? As always, Neil, real pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing with us, and I look forward to speaking to you soon.
Yeah, thank you, Caroline.